Hello everyone, Jolene here from Bookworm Adventure Girl. Welcome back. I hope that you are all doing well. This is where I talk about the books that I'm reading. I like to read diverse books and I highlight Canadian literature. I know the lighting is a little bit funky right now, so I apologize for that, but hopefully it won't be too bad. If you are new, thank you so much for checking out my channel. Please hit subscribe and stick around. Today I am going to be talking about all of the books that I finished in July. I have quite a stack here. I just realized that I'm missing a couple. That's okay. I will put those up, put the pictures up. So yeah, I wanted to do this wrap up because we're already well into August and I have several books to talk about, as I said. So from my last haul, the video that I did, we know that my TBR is currently at 1,548, which is the highest that it's ever been. So let's get started on bringing that number down and we'll see where we land. As usual, I'm going to start with my lowest rated or least enjoyed book and work my way to the highest rated or most enjoyed book. So in July, the reading starts around 3.25 stars. So that's a good sign because that's not too bad. And we're going to start with this book. I have some questions for you by Rebecca Makkai or Makkai. I think it's Makkai. This was my first book by this author. And I was a little disappointed because I thought that I was going to love this book. I have another one of her books on my shelves and I've heard great things about it. So I'm hoping to get to that and to enjoy it more. This one is a mystery and it started off fine. I thought the setup for it, for the mystery, was good. My hope was that I would become invested in this mystery and try to figure it out and either be correct or even better, to be surprised. So the main character in this is Bodhi. Bodhi is a podcaster and film professor, and she has been asked to teach a course at her old boarding school, which is in New Hampshire. So this brings up her past, and in particular the fact that her roommate at boarding school had been murdered. So they had convicted someone at the time, the athletic trainer, but many people believe that he's innocent. And so I thought that this was a great setup, but it started losing me a little bit when she's teaching this podcast class. And she uses this case and her students get very involved and she's trying to not get involved, but of course she is involved. And as Bodhi becomes more involved in finding out the truth, it gets a little bit interesting. So there were so many ways that this book could have gone. And I think there was potential for this to be a gripping read, but in the end, there really are no answers, no concrete answers. And I was left with more questions and almost what was the point then, right? So there are some themes explored that I think are good and that I liked. So for example, how the justice system is flawed and how cases like this can be approached without really looking at all of the facts. There's also the question of whether or not some of the girls were in relationships with a certain teacher. Of course, we've seen this in other literature, but in the end, the book just leans towards a direction, but nothing is ever really confirmed. So if you are a reader who likes things to be wrapped up at least a little bit in the end, at least some questions to have been answered, then this is, I'm going to say, definitely not the book for you. However, if you don't mind the ending to be pretty much ambiguous, and kind of leaving you with more questions than answers, then this book may work out better for you than it did for me. So that is that one. Next up is a book I've talked about before. It's Aftertaste by Daria Lavelle. I talked about this book already in the video that I did on 5 books about death, dying, grief, and bereavement. So I will link that video below, so you can definitely go and check it out if you're interested in hearing more about my thoughts on this particular one. Mostly what I liked is the premise of this book, because the main character can taste the favorite dishes of people who have passed away. And so that was very interesting to me. But yeah, definitely check out more if you'd like. Okay, next is The Maid's Secret by Nita Prose. And this is the 3rd book in the Molly the Maid trilogy. And unfortunately, as usually happens for me, the series begins to wane, right? And I'm not as interested as it goes on. That happens to me a lot with series. So I loved the first book, and I love Molly, the character. But this book focuses more on Molly's grandmother, and they have a really cool relationship. We know that from the first book. So we get more of the grandmother's backstory because of an antique that Molly has. And the backstory in some ways seems a bit far-fetched after spending time with these characters in the other couple of books. And a lot of the story is told in this one through a diary that the grandmother has written to Molly, which was okay, but not great. So if you are a fan and you want to finish this series, then I say go for it, because it's worth kind of hanging out with the characters again. But really, I think you can get away with book 1 for sure, book 1 and 2, and be fine. What I actually wish the 3rd book would have been is a fleshed out novel of the novella, which was book 2.5. I think it would have had a more heartwarming ending. And I think, this mystery could have been part of that story in some ways. I think they could have been put together and it would have made a better story, is what I'm trying to say. Because I do believe that this is the end of the series, based on what the author told me last year at WordFest. So unless that has changed. But I do look forward to seeing what else Nita Prose puts out and reading more from her. Okay, another book. Really, it was a short story that I also talked about in the video with the 5 books on death, dying, and grief and bereavement. So the short story was called Abscond, which is, I think, a great title. And it's by Abraham Verghese. And this was an audiobook through NetGalley. And for me, it was a taste test of Verghese's writing, because I have a couple of his books which are massive on my shelves. So they've been waiting to be read for a while now. So if you want to hear more of my thoughts on Abscond, please check out the other video, which I will link below. Okay, with these books, which are ranging from 3 to 3.75 stars, it brings the TBR stack to 1,545. My math is not that bad on this. I am not counting Abscond in this because it was a short story and not a book that I ever hauled physically. So it doesn't count for the TBR stack this time. So, okay, moving on to 4-star books. This is where the majority of my reading landed in July. So again, not bad, 4-star books. And I'm going to start with a poetry collection. It's called Bread and Circus. It's by Airea D. Matthews. And this is one of the books that I picked up. I hauled it from Book Outlet when I talked about judging books by their cover. And I will leave that video linked below as well, so you can go and check it out there, where I basically got 10 books because of their cover. So this collection of poetry has a lot going on, and I'll be honest that I'm not sure I understood it all. I know that I did not understand it all. I think if I had had more knowledge of the economist Adam Smith's work, I probably would have understood more. Many of the poems are like a response, or maybe not even a response, like maybe even a retaliation of some of his work. So many of the poems were about that, and they were also structured in very unique ways. And sometimes that made them like more difficult to read. It was odd. But the structures are interesting, so that was something, and I would like to talk to the author about the structures of them. But there were several poems that were autobiographical, and I would say that those were my favorite. Many of them, explored the author's relationship with her father and other relationships as well. But yeah, the poetry could be funny, but then it could also pack a punch. When it came to, capitalism especially, and some of, like I said, her relationships. So there was definitely something good here. And I might look into seeing if Airea has published, anything else, either more poetry or something like that, and check that out. Next, I have Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. I have enjoyed many of Elizabeth Gilbert's books. And I was drawn to this book in particular because, like Elizabeth Gilbert, I believe that we are all creative in our own way. I think we all have creativity. And in this book, she explores creativity. So as I was reading Big Magic, I kind of felt like it was a pep talk for anyone stuck in their creativity, or just feeling like, they aren't good enough to create. So I'm not sure that I really learned anything new, but there are several, good reminders, and there's some anecdotes that I think are helpful to hear. So if you are interested in creativity, or, if you are finding yourself stuck in your creativity or wanting to get started in creativity, then I do think that this book has something to offer and might be helpful. I think it's at least worth checking out and reading. So the next book I've also talked about a few times now on my channel, and it is I Promise It Won't Always Hurt Like This by Claire Macintosh. It's 18 Assurances on Grief. So again, I shared more about this in the video of the 5 books on death, dying, grief, and bereavement. And in this book, Claire Macintosh, who has had her own losses, most significantly, I would say her son at only a few weeks old. And she shares what she has learned about grief. And again, this was another good reminder book for me. And I would say that if you want to know more, about it, then definitely check it out. If you want to know what I think more about it, check out the other video, which, as I said, is linked below. Okay, let's see here. We have, next up, this book was the July pick for the Reading Across Canada Challenge. And we had a nice chat about this. I really liked it. It's called Interesting Facts About Space by Emily Austin. So I'm going to start by saying that I am, for some reason, really interested in this writer and kind of drawn to all of her books. I want to read all of her other books. And she's also one of the authors who is coming to WordFest this year, so I'm very excited about that and just learning more from her, and just looking forward to seeing what she has to say about some of her writing. So this book is about Enid, and it's told from her perspective. well, it's really like a stream of consciousness. And Enid is a quirky character, and sometimes I'm not sure that that's a great description, because I say that a lot, and oftentimes when I say it, it's really the case, and it is the case here. It's really the case that the character is neurodivergent. So that is the case here with Enid, and as the title may suggest, Enid is obsessed with space. And she knows like so many facts and details about space, and she wants to share them. She usually shares them with her mother. But there's also a bit of play on words when it comes to space, because there is also this sense of personal space that Enid needs in many ways, and kind of this, just having space is what I'm going to say. And then this is where, the book kind of goes a little bit deeper. So there are many things in it that are never said outright, but many things that are implied. Very good at showing and not telling. And this book, I've continued to think about it because of that. So there's actually quite a bit to talk about with this, which was great for a book club. But I'm going to talk about maybe the two relationships that Enid has that I think are written really well, and I think are worth mentioning. So first is the relationship that she has with her mother, and how mental health or mental illness is brought into the story through that relationship. Very, very interesting. And then the other relationship is with one of Enid's work friends, and I cannot think of his name right now. It may still come to me. But how he just kind of gets her and understands her. I also think that her relationships with her half-sisters is also interesting, and how she comes to understand some truths and reality that she was unaware of is also, I think, well done in this book. So, as I said, there's a lot here, and it's a book that, has continued to, make me think about how it was brought together. And I appreciate it more as time has gone by since reading it. And I love when books are able to do that. So that's a good one. Okay, next is a book that's been on my shelf forever. And I saw Jen Campbell talk about this book. I will leave her channel linked below. And I was reminded that I really wanted to read it after watching the movie, because I didn't know that it was a book when I watched the movie. So I will leave Jen's channel below, and also the video where she talks about this book. The book was Notes on a Scandal by Zoe Heller. And this book is also sometimes titled, does it say it here? No, it doesn't, but it's also sometimes titled, What Was She Thinking? So now when I watched this movie, it really stuck with me. I watched this many, many years ago. I thought it was very powerful. It stars Judi Dench, who is incredible, and Cate Blanchett. And it's a movie that I have thought of so many times since watching it. And when I read the book, it reminded me of some of the things that I had forgotten about, like in the film and in the story. And so I'm not sure if there are some differences, because there very well could be, between the movie and the book. But I will say that the book didn't affect me quite in the same way as the film did. So I'm not sure if that's because I already knew the story or why, but I think that it was still worth reading. And if you don't know the story, then I think maybe it might have more of an impact. So basically the story is about two teachers. There's Barbara, who is an older teacher, an experienced teacher. And then there's Sheba, who is a newer teacher, especially to this school. And Barbara kind of takes Sheba under her wing, and Sheba begins having a relationship with one of her students, a 15-year-old boy. And so the focus is all about this relationship, and Barbara suspects that something's going on. And Sheba does eventually confess to Barbara. And this is where the story kind of changes focus. So you start to realize Barbara's true intentions, and she uses Sheba and the information that she has to manipulate her, and the book is more of a psychological roller coaster ride, really. And I won't say more than that because I don't want to spoil it, but that's the brilliance of the story. So when things start to unfold and you start to realize, like, it's written very, very well. And now that I've read this, I want to watch the movie again, to compare it, but then also, just to kind of have that, oh my goodness, like, Judi Dench plays such a good role in this book. So the last 4-star book that I have is The Theory of Crows by David A. Robertson. This is an author that I have been wanting to read for a long, long time, and I'm so glad that I finally did read something, because now I also want to read more. This story is about, it's also about mental health. It's about a father-son relationship, but more so it's about a father-daughter relationship. So for those of you who might not have heard of David Robertson before, he is a Canadian author, but he's an Indigenous author, and his characters and stories are also Indigenous. So the main character in this story is Matthew, who has been dealing with his mental health and with anxiety. And it has caused him to really isolate himself and withdraw from everyone, from his relationships, from his family, with all the people around him. His daughter, Holly, won't even speak to him. And they become more and more estranged. And she doesn't want him speaking to her either. And also, I think it's his wife, too, that it's not good. So the first half of the book kind of sets that up. The second half of the book is what I loved. And Matthew is really close to his own father, and he's hoping to see him, to recenter himself and find some peace. And so he decides to take Holly along with him, and this journey that they take becomes so much more than, just a visit to see Matthew's father. But it shows their connection to the land and their, I'm going to say, transformation within the father-daughter relationship for sure, but also other things. So there's transformation that's done in many ways, like through grief and the afterlife. And there are just so many good things about how this book comes together that by the end I was just like, so it's a calm book in many ways, but it has a lot of really powerful messages too. So this has really made me want to read David Robertson's memoir, which is about him and his father. And I'm pretty sure that this, even though this is a fiction book, that it was influenced by David's own story, and then so in that one he tells the actual story. So with all of those 4-star books, that brings the TBR stack to 1,539. So next up are the 5-star reads that I enjoyed in July. One of the books that I've again talked about before is Tuck Everlasting by Natalie Babbitt. I absolutely adore this book. This was a reread for me, and I got the audio through NetGalley. So same as Abscond, they kind of both came together. But it's the 50th anniversary, the 50th anniversary celebration. This will be re-released on September the 2nd. And I loved that they had Alexis Bledel do the narration. And even though I've read this a couple of times before, listening to her read it brought new life to the story for me. And I absolutely loved it. It was such a great pairing. So I talk about this more in the video about the 5 books on death, dying, grief, and bereavement. So it's another one to check out if you're interested in that video. So next up, these are the two. I don't know how I missed grabbing these, but I have two other books. So the other book that I've seen the movie a couple of times, and the book has been on my shelf for a while, and it's The Boy in the Striped Pajamas. This is by John Boyne, and for some reason, I was surprised by how much I enjoyed this book. It's a quick read. It's maybe around 200 pages. So even though I knew what was going to happen, I really enjoyed it. But I found the writing of the story and how it was told from the boy's perspective to be very compelling. So this story takes place, excuse me, during the Second World War. And I think it was genius, actually, to tell the story the way the author did. So Bruno is 9 years old, and he is the boy that's telling this story. So we experience everything through his perspective, through his thoughts. And so we know that his father has a really important job and that he is very well respected. We know that we have to, leave our home as this boy. We have to leave the home behind and live in another home that doesn't feel the same at all. And we can also see, again, through, this little boy's eyes, some things from Bruno's bedroom, but we don't understand it all. And so Bruno can sometimes see people not far from their house from his window, and they look like they are wearing striped pajamas. And so Bruno is very innocent in all of this, and he eventually befriends another little boy who is on the other side of a fence. And this friendship, it becomes important to both boys, and you really feel that. Like, there are a couple of scenes in this book that to me are so powerful. There's one part where Bruno betrays his friend, and he doesn't even know why. He can't tell you why he feels he needs to betray him, but as soon as he does it, he feels so bad about it. And this book is one that, the film complemented it well, I think. And then I found out that there's a sequel, so I picked that book up because I want to know what the author does with this. So I do hope to get to that soon. And then the last book, did I bring it? No, that's not it. So the last book that I gave 5 stars to in July was Say Nothing by Patrick Radden Keefe. And this is a nonfiction book, and it is about the Troubles in Northern Ireland. This was the first time that I have read a nonfiction book about this topic and this subject, I guess, or this time. And Patrick Radden Keefe uses the case of Jean McConville as a starting point, or maybe a center point, to talk about those times and the aftermath. So Jean McConville was a mother of 10 kids, and she was abducted from her home, and her children never saw her again. And so we kind of go through their journey, but while we're doing that, this book gives the history of what happened, but also humanizes it. And there were some stories that, like, even though I have heard bits and pieces of those stories, this book really brought everything together in a way that I had never seen or read before. So it's super well researched, like, holy moly. That in itself is quite impressive. And much of this conflict happened in my lifetime, and although I definitely heard of it, I never felt like it was current. I didn't feel like it was current events, even though I would hear about it. So it wasn't until I got older and realized that this was happening and affecting people in, real time. So if you were looking for something on this subject matter, and if you enjoy historical books, then this is definitely, I think, one to check out. Yeah, it's so well written, so well done. So, okay, with those 5-star reads, and I'm not counting Tuck Everlasting, even though I loved it, because it was a reread, but it means that the TBR stack now stands at 1,537. So hopefully by the end of August, we can keep the trend of bringing the TBR stack down even more. That would be wonderful. These were all of the books that I finished in July. I'm trying to think, I feel like there was more, but that was it. So please let me know if you have read any of these, or if you are interested in reading any of them. Also, let me know what books you read in July that you enjoyed the most, or maybe didn't enjoy the most, whatever you decide to share. I look forward to chatting with you in the comments. As always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and don't forget to make every day an adventure.